Yeah. So the pandemic is a threat. It's a serious threat to the world. So that is why Biden and Mr. President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, they are the people capable for this task as we look forward working with them in this critical moment. Um, Thank you, and please thank you for you watching. And before we do that, I want to bring a very key issues that the people of Southern Cameroon. Thank you for watching. Here again, my name is Funton Daniel, speaking here from the great state of Texas, here in the United States. And now I have been speaking about the question of Southern Cameroon, Southern Cameroon territory. For those who are watching today for the first time, Southern Cameroon was never a conquered territory. This message I keep on emphasize. Southern Cameroon was never a conquered territory or a colonial territory of the neighboring country, La Republic du Cameroon. Southern Cameroon has the right and privilege to be able to resume its control. So we find this inadmissibly because the people of Southern Cameroon were forced into a wedding in which the wedding never took place. And now they are living under serious military invasion of a foreign nations. There are two different people. The people of Southern Cameroon, they own their own territory. And La Republique du Cameroon has their own territory. The reason why British imposed the people of Southern Cameroon and deprived them their freedom to be able to rule and govern themselves is something that is baffles me, and it baffles many of our fellow brothers and sisters throughout the world. And that is why I keep on bringing this systematic disenfranchise the people of their right to be self-governed. And that is why it becomes a troublesome. So we will keep on to this pace, analyze that we were never a conquered territory of La Republique du Cameroon. We have a unique government more than La Republique du Cameroon. You have the people of Southern Cameroon, they have shown an exemplary government leadership. And within those periods, in the 50s and the 60s, La Republique du Cameroon has not in any circumstances demonstrated such behavior. But unfortunately, we can imagine while we're living together with the British government, and they will, in the final date of decisions, choose that the people of Southern Cameroon be governed by a foreign nation, La Republique du Cameroon. That has never existed, but this is the unfortunate crisis that our people met, that the British government, after living with the people of Southern Cameroon, prepared the people of Southern Cameroon towards their final independence. They choose a foreign nation to govern the people whom they have been living together. That is absolutely disturbing. But however, that is why we will continue this emphasis, try to elaborate. Can you imagine that the neighboring country, La République du Cameroon, will continue to carry their military, invading the people of Southern Cameroon, killing the people indiscriminately, whereas there are some that are currently languishing in Nigeria, others are elsewhere, and some being repatriated from here in the United States. They have their land, their territory, that is being occupied by a foreigner. The people of Southern Cameroon have a well-grounded education system. They have a well-grounded education system. They have a better governance, and yet they can't govern themselves. They have a francophone that being superimposed on the people of Southern Cameroon to govern the people of Southern Cameroon, because the colonial members feel that it is safer for them to be able to eradicate the resources in Southern Cameroon through a foreign control, La République du Cameroon. Instead, the people of Southern Cameroon living on the crumbs in their own land, in their own territory. So this is the moment that we have been waiting. And so we will keep on this pattern of discussion and ask the United States that enough is enough. Because if the United States, if this great amazing nation stood against the British government, one will expect the British government by this time should have been well vested and understand the impact of colonialism, and yet they haven't. So if 200 years ago the United States stood against British government, no taxations and without representations, and yet while this ongoing crisis, the British government is still negotiating with La République a contract. Despite at this moment and this crisis, it is something abnormal to find that the British government will still be initiating or carry on a deal with this La République at this hard moment of the time in this history. There is something fundamentally wrong with UK. I can't emphasize more than this. There is something fundamentally wrong with the British government, that at this hard moment, they are still negotiating with a foreign nation, La République du Cameroon, to control the people of Southern Cameroon. It is quite amazing. But I'm going to bring a discussion how a British member of parliament questioned the UK government. Why? It seems they are purely... I don't know what word I can put, describe the British government. There's something fundamentally wrong with the UK. Of course, let's take for example, why would the British government living with Hong Kong for 150 years and at this moment believe that the people of Hong Kong should live happily with communist China? There is something wrong in this picture. Why would the UK believe that living with Hong Kong for 150 years and they expect the Hong Kong to live in harmony with the Chinese Communist Party? Of course, something is absolutely wrong here in this picture, but that is what it is. But however, it is time we call enough is enough. The people of Southern Cameroon, 8 million people of Southern Cameroon, have the right to govern themselves. They don't need control from a foreign nation, La République du Cameroon, to dictate on the people of Southern Cameroon how they should be governed and what form of government. They cannot even govern themselves. I mean, they can't even govern themselves. They have, since its creation, since Article 1349, that created La République du Cameroon, by the United Nations, Article 1349, that created La République du Cameroon. At this present moment, they have not in any circumstances transferred power from elected officials to the next elected official. They haven't. They haven't demonstrated. And yet, the British government sees the people of Southern Cameroon the only people that must be governed by La République du Cameroon. Well, what it is, so, but let's stay tuned.
Just 5 days before the US Senate was attacked, they came together to approve a resolution co-sponsored by 20 senators from both parties, from Marco Rubio to Cory Booker. And it was about this, about the brutal campaign of subjugation by the French-speaking government in Cameroon against the country's English-speaking minority. The Senate resolution condemned with great force the atrocities committed by the Anglophone separatist militias, and it speaks with equal power about the actions of the Cameroon government, including, I quote, torture and sexual abuse, massacres and burnings of villages, use of live ammunition against protesters, arbitrary arrests and unlawful detention, forced disappearance and deaths in custody, attacks on journalists and the regular killing of civilians, including women, children and the elderly. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Senate resolution noted approvingly that exactly 1 year before, the Office of the US Trade Representative, remember this is Donald Trump's trade representative, the direct counterpart of the Secretary of State for International Trade, had terminated Cameroon's access to preferential trade rights due, I quote, to persistent gross violations.
You listen, just stay tuned, and we're going to continue with that pattern of that conversations. So, no one can, within the British, that is the British member of parliament, because that's a different arm of government. That's a British member of parliament complaining bitterly about the question of the Southern Cameroon crisis, in which the British government is fully aware. Can you imagine that the British Prime Minister or the cabinet member of the British Prime Minister are carrying on negotiation? There is something fundamentally wrong here. They carry on negotiation with a foreign government on behalf of the people of Southern Cameroon at this critical moment. And what terms are you negotiating? Because they believe in this neo-colonialism. If you, Mr. Prime Minister Boris Johnson, you just liberate the UK from a wedding which was carried out. There was a wedding between UK and the European Union. There was a wedding in which the British voted to support a wedding with the European Union. You lead a campaign against that union, the wedding, which was officially initiated. And that wedding didn't last for long. What was wrong that you choose that that wedding should be terminated with the European Union? But unfortunately, it didn't occur to you to think that the people of Southern Cameroon share the same fundamental value with you. That living with La République du Cameroon for the past 69 years of wedding, the people need a break to have their own self. Of course, if wedding can terminate by UK against the European Union, why shouldn't it be terminated against the people of Southern Cameroon? Of course, in fact, there was never a wedding took place at the United Nations headquarters here in the United States. They still have La République du Cameroon, and you still have Southern Cameroon. And that is why a two-map was tabled at La République presidency, that the United Nations still recognized two as separate entities. In this critical moment, I can see your cabinet secretly cannot deal with La République du Cameroon at this critical moment. Let's listen to your member of parliament, Mr. Boris Johnson.
Of internationally recognized human rights. And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, in that same spirit, the Senate resolution urged members of the international community to join the United States in a strategic collective effort to put pressure on the government of Cameroon, including through, I quote, the use of all available diplomatic and punitive tools. And I quote that Senate resolution at length, Madam Deputy Speaker, because I believe that we must ask ourselves what on earth those senators would think if they knew that on that very same day, when they were unanimously passing those strong words of condemnation towards the government of Cameroon and urging the international community.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine when the United States is trying to clean the mess of UK? United States is cleaning the mess of UK. Why UK is secretly organizing a deal with La République in vis-a-vis the crisis of Southern Cameroon. Why United States is cleaning their mess. There's something outrageous wrong somewhere with this UK. There's something actually wrong somewhere, and which I can't comprehend it, If the United States Senate is writing a resolution condemning the action, but UK is secretly negotiating a deal with La République du Cameroon, with undermining the value of the people of Southern Cameroon, despite the fact that they owe the wrongdoing on the people of Southern Cameroon. Okay, Article 1514 XV of the United Nations Charter, it called for decolonizations. It did not call for partial decolonizations. So if Article 1514 XV called for decolonization, why did the UK choose that the people of Southern Cameroon either voted to join La République or voted to join Nigeria? The third option was eliminated by the UK government, the UK administrative authority, on the question of Southern Cameroon. And we are still suffering the pain and suffering because of the unjust. And I can in fact believe that at this critical moment, they are still carrying on the same injustice they did some several years ago, some 50 years or 60, 70 years ago, against the very people of Southern Cameroon. They are still continuing in the same pattern with Boris Johnson, because he negotiated a separation term with the European Union. But he didn't see the people of Southern Cameroon ought to leave La République du Cameroon. But they see it. Of course, you can listen to one of their representatives say they value the integrity of Cameroon, fundamentally violate the terms of the Article 1514 XV, which require a decolonization, in which they fought the people of Southern Cameroon for their freedom to live in a coherent, existing life. Yet, let's listen to the Speaker of the UK Parliament.
To join them, here in the United Kingdom, we were bringing into effect a brand new continuity trade agreement with Cameroon. A trade deal which was agreed by ministers, apparently with no consideration and clearly no concern for the persistent gross violations of international human rights that are taking place inside Cameroon. A trade deal which none of us in this House, bar the ministers on the bench opposite, have even been allowed to read, let alone debate or approve, and a trade deal which may or may not contain provisions on human rights, but until the government finally decides to publish it, we, the elected members of this Parliament, simply cannot know. I hope that members on all sides will keep the example of Cameroon in mind and consider the words of the US Senate and the actions of the US Trade Representative when judging how to vote later on, because we all know that on occasions like this, when amendments are up for debate, ministers will try to persuade us that they don't disagree with the good intentions behind them, and they just don't think that they're really required. However, if that is what ministers are saying today in relation to Amendments 2 and 3 on human rights, or 1 and 5 on parliamentary scrutiny, I would only ask members to remember Cameroon. A trade deal done with a regime which is slaughtering women and children just because they live in English-speaking towns. A trade deal done in the face of the US Senate on the same day that they called for international support. And a trade deal which, incredibly, has still not been laid before Parliament almost 3 weeks after it came into force. I would urge all members to think about the Cameroon deal and how little consideration ministers gave either to human rights or to the rights of this Parliament when they decided to sign it. And then finally ask yourself, and ask your conscience, whether you accept what those same ministers are saying when they go through the amendments before us today and tell you they're not really required.
You watch. That's the dead walking president of La Republique du Cameroon. But anyway, the people of Southern Cameroon are suffering in this crisis. They're suffering in this crisis because of the interests of France. And you can listen from the previous message speaker, the member of the UK Parliament, speaking, and she has been very forceful speaking about this crisis on Southern Cameroon. And what will expect them, because this is Parliament speaking, not the executive arm of the British government, because the executive arm of the British government remain muted. They remain muted. And they can't talk about it. They remain silent. And the slaughtering of the citizens of Southern Cameroon continue to persist against the will of the people, and that they deprive them their right to self-govern. Because they see La Republique, because La Republique is an indirectly mediator for French government, so that the France can benefit from the raw material deposit in Southern Cameroon. That is why the slaughtering and killing of citizens of Southern Cameroon is non-existent. It's not a priority for them to care about it. Of course, Africans are animals, so they can kill at will. So long as the interest of France is the top priority, it doesn't matter about the people of Southern Cameroon. And that is why we will continue to speak up, raise our voice, till thy kingdom come. Can you imagine that while the people of Southern Cameroon are being slaughtered, this guy that you saw, he walking like a ghost person, sometimes they call Paul Biya, that's the person that has been in power for 38 years, for Christ's sake. Been in power for 38 years, for Christ's sake. He was 38. He was president when this Emmanuel Macron was 2 years old, if I'm not mistakenly. I apologize for the mistake. However, he was president in 1982 when Emmanuel Macron was 2 years old. Today, he is the head of the French presidency. He is still there, and that is him visiting the same Emmanuel Macron, leading him to his palace. Imagine that the previous French president had been in that format, living without change of leadership. Where would he have been in power since this guy was in power since he was 2 years old? because this guy is able to provide a channel of raw material that can be easily transferred to France without any visa. So therefore, let's keep him in power. For the interest of France is a top priority. When nations try to question the credibility and the value of France in Africa, that is when he persuaded the the United Nations that they need to remove that particular individual, especially in the 13 colonies of Africa. As soon as he noticed that someone is trying to oppose France, France immediately eliminated those individuals. When even there is a sound democratic government elected by the people, yet that is not a value or the interest of France. So long as the interest of France is not valid, so that person must be eliminated. And he must immediately order the bombing of those areas without even seeking opportunity. That's how misabuse of power of leadership. Well, Africa is the area where France can do what it takes. Of course, the interest of African is not a priority, so long as the interest of France is the what matters to them. So that is why we keep on speaking up, raise our voice to the highest level, question the validity of France in Africa, until we are able to see this and speak up, and then understand that we will no longer live in enslavement of France. That is when our people need to speak up. We have education, we have knowledge, we are not empty brains. We can, if the environment allow for this amicable level of playing field, then you will see the value. Of course, here in the United States, you all see the vaccine. The research was conducted, and it was an African. Of course, the United States is very honest in its upbringing. United States is very honest. They told who actually engineering the vaccine. It's an African. So African, if the level of playing field was allowed, Africa ought to be in its highest level of so. But however, France controls every aspect of Africa. That prosperity is not a top priority. So France will produce them on behalf of Africa. And because they have a chronic leadership, like the one that walking like a walking dead, so long as the interest of France is a priority, none of the interests of Africans shall be able to oversee. And so that is why we, the people of Southern Cameroon, we cannot live in that a chronic environment. We must have to sustain and live so that we can be able to govern ourselves, produce the most valued education system for the people of Southern Cameroon. We can live in an environment where France controls every aspect of life. You all listen. When Southern Cameroon Financial Institution Bank, the Southern Cameroon Bank was able to provide loan to citizens up to above $1 million, whereas in France, in La République du Cameroon, they can't even deliver a 500,000 loan to its citizens. They have to fly to France to get an approval to loan a 500,000 to that country. That's to show how chronic, draconic this French system are to the French colony. But the people of Southern Cameroon cannot live in that fundamental aspect. So that is why we, the people of Southern Cameroon, we need to leave La République du Cameroon so France can do whatever it takes to deal with La République du Cameroon colonial territory. We cannot. You all imagine former US president allocate $10 million to the education system of Southern Cameroon. That amount of money, $10 million is a fundamentally amount of money that was given. Imagine that at the time that money was given, that money was taken away by Ahidjo and transferred and embezzled it in La République du Cameroon. And today, our education system, the priority of Foncha, that at the time was the Prime Minister of Southern Cameroon, he wanted to use the money, the $10 million that was allocated by the US President. That money was dedicated for the institution of learning. Ombe was his priority. Ombe, he wanted to raise Ombe to a full technical university in research. That were never materialized because they felt by Ahidjo that was occurring in Southern Cameroon territory. Imagine the same amount of money was given to India. Today, they have one of the best doctors in the world in every engineering. It's because of the visionary. But the people of Southern Cameroon cannot, because we are glued by a certain French colony, La Republique of Cameroon, that has been glued to us, that we don't even have access to voice ourselves in this aspect, because this is systematically englued by the UK government. They felt that we ought to live under a control of a foreign nation like Republic of Cameroon, and that we can't govern ourselves. And that is the spirit that we are living in this nightmare. Fellow brothers and sisters, this can no longer continue. And that is why we are at war. The war for self-determination, the war of independence, the war of identity, that we can govern ourselves. We don't need directives from a foreign nation, La Republique du Cameroon, to describe us how we can govern ourselves. We know we can do better. And that is why we keep on raising our voice to the current President of the United States. Stay tuned, don't go away.
There was just a deeply flawed election in Uganda, where Museveni has again held on to power in no small part by engaging in a blatant disregard for human rights. There are other countries of real concern in Ethiopia, the violence in the Tigray region, in Sudan, on the other hand, where there's been an encouraging transition to democracy recently. How do you plan to better support the fragile transition in Sudan while pushing back on those countries that are backsliding on their commitment to democracy, like Uganda, or some would argue Ethiopia?
Well, I think it starts with our very active engagement, not being AWOL when these problems emerge. Ethiopia, I share your deep concerns. We have seen a number of deeply concerning actions taken, including atrocities directed both at people in Tigray, directed at Eritrean refugees in Ethiopia. We, I think, need to see much greater access to the region, accountability, an effort to put a dialogue in place so that the issues that caused the conflict can actually be discussed and litigated as opposed to dealt with through violence. We need to see a restoration of communications. We need access for humanitarian assistance in the region. And I worry as well that what started there has the potential to be destabilizing throughout the Horn of Africa. So I would like to see American diplomacy fully engaged in trying to contend with this challenge. You cited a number of other places where we have, I share your concerns about the elections in Uganda, concerns in Cameroon recently, particularly violence directed at the Anglophone population. So there are a whole series of places where we have challenges where I think the United States can help make a difference, and that starts with being engaged.
Thank you, Senator Coons.
That was the U.S. current Secretary of State speaking about the Southern Cameroon.
Whether it's in failed authoritarian states like Venezuela, or it's in Putin's Russia.
That was the U.S. Secretary of State, the current U.S. Secretary of State, speaking about the crisis in Southern Cameroon and elsewhere around Africa. You all listened because I spoke on the question of Southern Cameroon sovereignty. So for those of you who don't know much about Southern Cameroon is a sovereign government. It's a sovereign government. If you look underneath me on this video, on this live broadcast, when you look underneath me, that is the Prime Minister's office, the executive president of Southern Cameroon, a government, a head of government. So let's look, that this is United Nations document. This is when it says
a number of deeply concerning actions taken, including atrocities directed both at people in Tigray, directed at Eritrean
it says
in Ethiopia.
The government of Southern Cameroon. It did not say
much greater access to the region.
Remember, it said the government of Southern Cameroon. So Southern Cameroon is not. There is a great distinction between Southern Cameroon. I want to come back to the Biafran case. The Biafran case. So the Biafran case is different from the Southern Cameroon case. So the Biafra,
and I worry as well.
The Biafra
has the potential to be.
The Biafra used to be part. Biafra is part of Nigeria. You know, this article 1349 that created La Republique du Cameroon is the same article that created Nigeria, and their independence was 1960, the Federal Republic of Nigeria. When that document was initiated, the Biafra was part of Nigeria. Do you understand? So, just as the same article on La Republique, Southern Cameroon was not part of La Republique du Cameroon. So, the people of Southern Cameroon is a people on its own that has their sovereign government with a prime minister, head of government, that the presidency that you saw underneath of me in this broadcast is the presidency of Southern Cameroon with the head of government. On my left on this broadcast, you have Endele, the first prime minister of Southern Cameroon, that were duly elected by the people of Southern Cameroon. The second person is the prime minister, Dr. Jongo Foncha, elected in Southern Cameroon as the prime minister, head of government. And the third is Joa, leader of the Southern Cameroon government, you know. And these are systematically government that were dismantled, were intentionally dismantled by complicity of the UK government with alliance of the French government to dismantle the government of Southern Cameroon, a democratic institution of Southern Cameroon, a democratic institution with elected cabinet, and dismantle systematically. Today, people will call, oh, you from Cameroon. No, I am not from Cameroon. Well, that is what people will see. Oh, you from Cameroon. When I say Southern Cameroon, people, oh, you from Cameroon. No, I am not from La Republique du Cameroon. So I am from Southern Cameroon and Ambazonia. That's the terms, that's the government we respect. That is our cabinet, that's our people, and that is why we asking them to stay on focus and speak the truth. Speak la veracity, the truth. The truth must prevail. And that is why we asking the U.S. Embassy in the neighboring country, La Republique du Cameroon, to stand up for its expectations and do the right thing. And we're asking the Biden administration to do the right thing. The people of Southern Cameroon have the right and privilege to exist as a sovereign nation. They do not need. There are 8 million of people. There are more than 8 other some major nations and the rest of the world. But we are 8 million of people, and we should be able to govern ourselves. We don't need education from La République du Cameroon to tell us and how we should be able to govern ourselves. We govern ourselves more than they do. They have not, in any circumstances, demonstrated this capability that they can be able to govern. They have never have, since its independence from the so-called the French colony, they have never demonstrated change of leadership. You have previous brutal dictatorship, Amadou Ahidjo, that was in power for 25 years. And this current brutal dictatorship that is in power for 38 years. Imagine, this is Southern Cameroon. Just for a few years, they have 3 prime ministers. And there have never been any fighting. It was unanimously transfer of power. And the other person was able to become a leader of the opposition of the same government. What an amazing institution in Southern Cameroon. Yet the world did not foresee it. And that is why the U.S. Undersecretary, Thibault Nagy, said, oh, the so-called Ambo boys. I can imagine a Secretary of State making those in an arrogant statement, describing the people as the Ambo boys. I'm sorry, Mr. Secretary, they are not. We have a government and a cabinet that was dismantled, and we want that government to be in full flesh. We cannot live under the umbrella of a foreign nation, La République du Cameroon. They have their own institution. They can do whatever they can. But the people of Southern Cameroon, government, must persist. You cannot use your opinion, Mr. Secretary, and place it under the people of Southern Cameroon and describe it as the U.S. government. U.S. government doesn't believe in your opinion. You're simply a secretary and you interpret what the U.S. government wants and not your own personal opinion. Because that is why a law person asking you a valid question. Let me come back to that question. Just hold on. Just hold on. Okay, let me come back to that. Let me bring up what I'm speaking about.
Resistance there is on in the Anglophone region. So what can we do that we're not already doing?
Well, like I said, the best we can do for right now is just work with our allies to really make the Cameroonian government understand the need for a real dialogue. And if that doesn't include the diasporas of the Cameroonians, because they have a great, and I'm sorry, I don't know the exact name of it, whether it's the Multicultural Institution for National Reconciliation or something, which on the face of it, there have been a couple of these, but they have not been provided adequate budget and they have not really done anything. Because what the country needs more than anything else is a genuine, open dialogue, probably to include the diasporas of the Cameroonians, because they have a great deal of interest in this. Because, sir, what's happening, both sides are becoming further and further radicalized. Unfortunately, I believe that the president of Cameroon is being told by his hardliners that he can win this thing militarily. There is no way that they're going to.
We will be coming to that critical point. So don't go away. Don't go away. So imagine as you watching this broadcast, when you look underneath me, that is the Prime Minister of presidency, or just like the White House. That is just like the White House here in the United States. That is the Prime Minister, head of government in Southern Cameroon territory. If you look at the Biafran case that I'm often referred to, it's different. They don't have a Prime Minister. They never had a government before, but they are fighting. By some token, when there is evidence that any nation or any citizen or any community believe that there is substantial evidence of being persecuted, then they have the right to seek freedom. And that is allowed at the United Nations. So the people of Southern Cameroon case is different. The people of Southern Cameroon is a government that dismantled with the complicity of the UK government. And that you saw below are the prime ministers of Southern Cameroon that were duly elected. La République du Cameroon, as we claim, has never handed over power in an elected democratic institution. One brutal dictator to the next brutal dictator. And yet the world see them as a more organized to govern more than the people of Southern Cameroon to be able to govern themselves. And that is what I'm speaking. On the question of the U.S. Undersecretary giving his opinion rather than what a valid question the U.S. lawmaker is asking. So you're going to listen to the U.S. lawmaker asking a short, simple, valid question and see how the U.S. politician, the secretary, responded. It seems he is not in touch with what is happening on the people of Southern Cameroon. The demonstration here in the United States should prove that the people of Southern Cameroon do not, in any circumstances, wishes to live with La République du Cameroon. And the demonstration at home also validate that the people of Southern Cameroon does not want to live with La République du Cameroon. And they have their nations, they have their capital, their presidency. They just need to renovate their presidency and start form their government and start build it from scratch. They don't need assistance from UK government. But while we are busy struggling, the UK government is busy negotiating with contract. This is Resolution 684. In January, the US Senate resolution is adopting this. The UK government is busy negotiating with contract with La République du Cameroon on the same Southern Cameroon. There is something fundamentally wrong with UK. Absolutely. There is something fundamentally wrong with UK government. They believe that while we are fighting, they are struggling negotiating contract with this stupid La République du Cameroon. But anyway, let's come back to the U.S. Undersecretary. Stay tuned. Don't go away.
Win this militarily. The violence is going to get worse in the Northwest and the Southwest. The arm for an arm, literally an eye for an eye, and the whole world will be blind there. The violence will spread to the West Province. It may even spread to the Littoral Province, which is the large city of Douala. So there has to be something. We are very, very energetically speaking with our allies. That's why I said that we just had in the Security Council this Monday what the United Nations calls an ARIAS, where it's an open debate, and it's so clear that everybody wants to move forward on this. Are sanctions on the table? Everything's on the table moving forward. But we have to bring this situation to an end. Else, there's a possibility of what happened in Nigeria with Boko Haram. Started as a small movement, and now look at it. And it'd be disastrous for the region if the Cameroon government turned this thing into yet another type of Boko Haram.
Or Boko Haram could come back into Cameroon. Well, how do you mentioned, that it appears to be spiraling out of control because the more the security forces clamp down, the more resistance there is in the Anglophone region. So what can we do that we're not already doing?
Well, like I said, the best we can do for right.
Do you listen to the U.S. lawmaker asking a valid question? The more they crack down, the more the violence persists. What can we do that we are not already doing? That is a U.S. lawmaker asking a valid question to the U.S. Undersecretary for African Affairs. And it seems he is not even clueless of what is going on in Southern Cameroon. The people of Southern Cameroon ask that the United Nations document Article 16 or Article 1514 of decolonization be fully implemented. These resolutions did not ask for partial decolonization. It called for decolonization. It did not ask for partial decolonization. So the people of Southern Cameroon should have decolonized. The UK government choose what they want on behalf of the people of Southern Cameroon, rather than what the United Nations document requires. And that is the mess we are suffering now. So we are expecting the new administration to abide by the resolution of the United Nations. If that is the document, let's go by it and let's face the reality. Let's do the fact and let's go by the United Nations document. The people of Southern Cameroon do not in any circumstances want to live with La République du Cameroon in whatsoever. Our people back home has demonstrated that ability that they do not in any circumstances welcome La République du Cameroon. We in the diaspora, as he's rightly said, have demonstrated we do not in any circumstances want to live with La République du Cameroon. So therefore, for the new administration to be able to be coherent, then they need to abide by the will of the people, must supersede the will of opinion individuals. Let's listen to.
Now is just work with our allies to really make the Cameroonian government understand the need for a real dialogue. And if that doesn't happen relatively quickly, then we have to look at the array of other tools we have in our...
Before he speaks, he says a real dialogue. That dialogue has been singing for the past 4 years. That is what they've been singing. And yet, no one wanted to speak the truth. No one wanted to talk about the reality. The Article 1514, that is what is required. Article 1514, SV of the United Nations. It calls for complete decolonization. So the people of Southern Cameroon should not be handed over to another nation as partial decolonization. That is not what the document specifies. It calls for decolonization. So the people of Southern Cameroon should be decolonized. And that is what it should be a top priority. La République is going and shooting, killing our people. You all know, you have seen it. The Ngembo massacre, the Mbutu massacre, all around massacre, all the massacre, both in Southern Cameroon. The essence, La République is doing that by some way they are going to quell down so that they can get control of Southern Cameroon, so that they can have implanted governors, and also all the governors in Southern Cameroon, they are all La République appointed decree. They can rule by elected officials because none will be elected. They will go by an appointed decree, so they can glue onto the people of Southern Cameroon with draconic fashion. Stay tuned.
Toolkit, because frankly the possibility of sanctions is always there. But it's always better to work in concert with our friends before we go in that direction, because the frustrating thing is it is in the interest of everybody to have a national dialogue. The situation will not end militarily. Each day, the atrocities will get worse and worse.
Is permanent separation of the two regions a possibility?
Did you listen? You know, that's why I fell in love with law body, because they speak about law. They speak genuine. They speak what is valid. And that is what the problem that is currently leading to this crisis. He's asking, what about permanent separation? Yes, permanent separation, Mr. Undersecretary. If you are not knowledgeable about what the people of Southern Cameroon want, then you might be the wrong secretary for the United States. You have to listen to the people. You cannot dictate your personal opinion and analyze it to be the State Department opinion or State Department legal document. No, that's your opinion. And you have to listen to what the people want. And that is what a valid lawmaker asking that valid question. Permanent separation. Yes, that it is. Permanent separation. That is what it is. And that is what must be on the table. Let La République leave the Southern Cameroon territory. That is what is required, Mr. Undersecretary.
Sir, I don't believe so, because I think that most Cameroonians, including in the Southwest and Northwest, have a sense of Cameroonian.
Mr. Secretary, you traveled? Did you actually travel to Southern Cameroon? No, you didn't. You just end up in Yaoundé and you return. How did you evaluate that the people, Southern Camerooners, the Catholic, uh, uh, the Catholic cardinal, conducted a survey, and in conclusion, Mr. President, for your knowledge or knowledge sake, it concluded that 70-something% of citizens of Southern Cameroon in a 1,000 survey want a complete independence from La République, Mr. Secretary. If you are not aware, so I am educating you, because when you travel, you did not go to Southern Cameroon. You remain in La République. After receiving your luggage, you return back to US. But I am speaking a Catholic cardinal that give 1,000 survey, and in outcome of that, showing 1,000 survey, that the outcome showing the complete independence. The people want a complete, eradicate La République from Southern Cameroon. There is a recent survey which is 3,000. I haven't read the statistic to be able to talk about it, and I am sure that will also give you a significant. I don't know where you got your information that the people in Southwest and Northwest want a Camerooners. That is where you got it all wrong, Mr. Undersecretary. Get your information right. The people of Southern Cameroon want a complete eradicate La République out of Southern Cameroon completely, Mr. Undersecretary.
And the concept of a separated, what they call Ambazonia, in my view, is not realistic.
In my view, it's not realistic. I mean, it's an absurd for the U.S. Undersecretary giving his own personal opinion rather than the will of the people. Why didn't you quote the Kanantumi statistics that was conducted? 1,000 survey showed that about 70-something% want a complete independence from La République du Cameroon. Why didn't you mention it? You said the people of Southwest and Northwest want a Camerooners. I don't see where you got that. That information is wrong and is false, and you falsify your opinion on behalf of the U.S. government, answering questions to the U.S. lawmaker. That is an abomination, Mr. Undersecretary.
It is the view of the United States of America to recognize the integrity of the country of Cameroon.
The integrity of the country Cameroon. This is a document. Below, underneath you, in this live broadcast, you have 3 executive arms of government of Southern Cameroon that were dismantled by the British government. And 8 million people, you think they can govern themselves? We are more than other nations. There are other nations that are probably 3 millions. We are 8 millions, and we should be able to govern ourselves. We don't need directives from La République du Cameroon to tell us how we should be governed.
Thank you very much. Now you're back.
But as I'm speaking, I'm sure the president, the newly elected administration, we're still wishing him he's happy in the new office. But I know it's challenging, but I know he's capable for up to the task. So stay tuned, don't go away.
With the UNHCR, thousands more have been forced to flee their homes and dozens of villages have been ethnically cleansed. According to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs and High Commissioner for Refugees, 437,000 from the Anglophone regions have been displaced, whilst the charity Protection Approaches says that 3.3 million are in need of humanitarian assistance. Amnesty reports that 450 to 500 civilians and 185 members of the security services have been killed. UNICEF estimates that 58 schools have been destroyed, 47 political leaders are being held without charge, and a recent Amnesty report refers to, and I quote, arbitrary arrests, torture, unlawful killings and the destruction of property. The Catholic Bishops' Conference has called it, quote, inhuman, blind, monstrous violence. And of the October election, Archbishop Samuel Cleda, the president of the Bishops' Conference, says, one has the impression election results are decided before voting takes place. My lords, we can all share in these horrendous statistics, but what I want to do is this evening focus on what conclusions we can draw from the United Kingdom's dismal approach to this situation. More than ever, with Britain's potential departure from the European Union, we must seek to define our role in the world. And it would be helpful to know from the Noble Baroness the Minister whether, for instance, human rights issues were assessed before, for instance, the New Age natural gas deal was announced, what consideration has been given to targeted sanctions, and whether this crisis figures in the Foreign Secretary's recent commitment on atrocity prevention. My lords, the government mustn't suggest that this is a level playing field conflict in a civil war between equal sides. Too often in the past, in Bosnia, in Rwanda, in Darfur, the United Kingdom chose the path of moral equivalence, hinting that both sides are as bad as each other is the easy way out. In a previous generation, this was known as appeasement. Moral equivalence signals that we cannot be expected to pass judgment on which side is more to blame for the conflict. Instead, we issue the usual calls for a cessation of violence and a negotiated settlement, or we frame political conflicts as if they were natural disasters requiring aid, and we're very generous at sending aid rather than political solutions. At its worst, in Rwanda, Bosnia and Darfur, we have portrayed the persecution of unarmed civilians by repressive governments as a result of ancient ethnic hatreds, thereby dehumanising the victims and denying the legitimacy of the protesters who yearn for the rights that we take for granted. By citing ancient ethnic hatreds, we absolve ourselves of the obligation under international law to stop the killing. It's also disingenuous to defend our tepid response by claiming that the circumstances present us with a simple binary choice between wringing our hands in dismay or putting British boots on the ground. This is to ignore the potential for soft power. The international community, be it concerted and sustained diplomatic pressure, carefully targeted sanctions, or international justice. The grievances fueling the violence in Cameroon did not erupt overnight. We had plenty of warning, but we chose not to listen to Cameroon's Anglophone minority. Anglophones represent 20% of the population, but for years there was only one Anglophone member of the 36-person cabinet in Yaoundé, just one example of their systematic marginalisation. My lords, we shouldn't underestimate the influence we have, but it speaks volumes that we left it to the American ambassador to express his disapproval of the Cameroonian government's brutal response to peaceful protests. For decades, the Francophone government has ignored the pleas of moderate representatives of civil society, such as church leaders. Calls for a federal solution were ignored by President Biya 36 years in power, fueling the calls for secession and thereby polarising opinion. Breaking point came when the Francophone government sought to impose French laws in the French language in Anglophone courts, and sent Francophone teachers speaking French into English schools. They responded to peaceful protest with disproportionate force. The International Crisis Group reports that a government helicopter, for instance, hovered outside a church, shooting Anglophone worshippers as they emerged from Mass. Inevitably, disproportionate actions led to the current escalation. In the face of all this, my lords, there is nothing admirable about being even-handed in the face of the suffering of the Anglophone community. The United Kingdom should support the Anglophone community's peaceful civil society leaders in seeking genuine and inclusive talks. We need a targeted strategy for atrocity prevention and, my lords, a commitment to bring to justice those responsible for human rights violations wherever they occur.
My Lords, I too would like to thank my noble friend Lord Botan for initiating this debate and too for his passionate introduction. I don't want to repeat his excellent background to the complex and contested decolonisation process that he referred to, but as my noble friend Lord McConnell highlighted, particularly since the
fight for democracy, whether it's in failed authoritarian states like Venezuela, or it's in Putin's Russia.
I want to thank you for watching. This has been Comrade Fulton Daniel speaking here from the great state of Texas here in the United States on the question, did the British government, did Boris Johnson abandon the wedding? He abandoned the European wedding and now sees the people of Southern Cameroon to stay in a wedding with a neighboring country like Republic of Cameroon. What a double jeopardy. So if Boris Johnson believes that the UK shouldn't be in European Parliament, he lead the personal opposition against the UK against the British, against the European Union, that the UK government ought to stay on its independence. However, they didn't foresee the paradoxically that the people of Southern Cameroon have the same feeling as well. They are carrying on initial building business deal with
refugees in Ethiopia. I think need to see.
They are carrying on business deal with La Republique of Cameroon, as you listed from the Member of Parliament of the UK, and that in the same time that the United States lawmaker, US Senate, voting on Resolution 684, the US Congress voting on Resolution 684.
And I worry as well
that UK government under Boris Johnson carry on a secret deal.
I would like to see American diplomacy fully engaged in trying to
arrangements were scrapped in '72. The English-speaking Cameroonians have complained bitterly.
You can see his government, his cabinet ministers are carrying on negotiations with a neighboring country like Republic of Cameroon and undermine the crisis that is going on in Southern Cameroon territory. That is an abomination. If you believe that UK cannot live together in the same umbrella with European Union, why do you think the people of Southern Cameroon should live under the same umbrella, paradoxically, with a foreign nation like Republic of Cameroon? So the people of Southern Cameroon can govern themselves. They did govern themselves under the British administrative authority. La Republique did not. Imagine that when the crisis erupted in La Republique, they seek a refuge in Southern Cameroon territory. So today, our people are now seeking refuge to Nigeria because of invading foreigners that we invited in our homes. Dear Mr. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, this is not an appropriate moment. The people of Southern Cameroon want to live alone. And this is, and my broadcast, this is Comrade Fulton Daniel speaking live here from the great state of Texas, here in the United States, and wish you all a happy and wonderful day. Thank you.